Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Board Games Unlocked, and today I'm doing my top 10 in the minority games, which is just kind of like a catch-all phrase for games that I am in the minority, or my opinion is definitely in the minority. Now, what I mean by that, I'm actually doing this in a more negative aspect, because these are games that the vast amount of people actually like, but I, for one reason or another, do not. And basically what I did for this is I looked at the top 500 games on Board Game Geek. I just went, 1 through 500, and looked at all the games that I have ranked on there that were relatively low. And that's just kind of how I decide on which games I even considered for this list. So, obviously games that were high and that were in there that I didn't like would put me in the minority, is the way I viewed it. This could also be spun in a way of but I'd have to go way back on games that most people don't like that I do. This seemed to be easier. Now, obviously, because I am in the minority here, that most people are going to disagree with me on. However, I figured this could be relatively a fun one, maybe a controversial one, just because, again, most people like these games. And a couple caveats here. One, if this is your favorite game of all time, that's great. Me not liking it doesn't change that, shouldn't change that. And two, I'm not going to bash on these games. This isn't me talking about why I think they're bad or anything like that. I'm just going to be explaining why I didn't like them. So, as with all my top 10 lists, let's go ahead and start with an honorable mention, which was a game that I was actually very ecstatic for because it's from a publisher that I tend to like most of their games. In fact, I think there's been it might just be this one that I don't like, that I can think of off the top of my head. No, sorry, there's two, but most people didn't like that anyway. This was a Civilization game by this company, and this game is called Tapestry. So Tapestry, like it says on the box, is a Civilization game, and I really do think that had that not had that little, subtitle or moniker or whatever you call it underneath that, I think I might have went into it liking it a little bit more. However, expecting it to be a Civilization game and it not really being one is just kind of a big problem for me. Civ games are very hard as board games for me anyway, just because I do like Civ as a PC game. I think that's the penultimate standard for what Civ games should be. Except, of course, that takes 9 years to play, and any board game does not. But Tapestry just was it felt so samey. It's not without its benefits. I do like the fact that you have the concepts or the ideas. You're not really playing any civilizations, you're playing ideas. And those do play different again, but there's a double-edged sword to that because they had to do a balance pack to fix it because it was unbalanced when it came out. I really don't like the polyomino style kind of, separate terrain you have to build the, buildings on, and it's even a race. It is a race to build the wonders in the other games, but this one, I just didn't really like that aspect of it, even though I like the fact that the minis are painted. At the end of the day, it was just 4 different tracks, and I didn't find any of them particularly interesting. I don't think there's really a meta. I just don't care, even if there is one. Some people, really like this game. I should have put what number this was. Honestly, actually, I can easily look that up. Because I have my old laptop right here. So I can look it up. I should have just put it on before I did this. But it is number... Watch, it's not even going to be in the top. Yeah, it's number 256 overall. Again, I'm not even going to disparage on whether or not I deserve it to be what number, because I don't know. And at the same time, obviously, I don't really care for any of these games, so I wouldn't put them anywhere near the top 100. But anyway, but Tapestry is an honorable mention because it's playable, and I've done reviews over the expansions, but this game is kind of such a nah for me. So that's my honorable mention. Now getting into the top 10, and what's actually very interesting about this list is I made it in reverse. So I had my running list of all the games that I considered, and I put them into PubMeeple, and and instead of picking which one I thought was worse between the two, I actually picked one that I liked better. So like the number one that came out was the one that I was like, yeah, no, out of all of these, this is the one I'd play. So I actually went all the way to the bottom and did the 10 from the bottom, and that was an interesting, and it was accurate, so I thought that was kind of cool. Anyway, so my number 10 is probably the biggest game, one of the biggest games on this list, at least in terms of a campaign style. This one I played, maybe like 4 or 5 scenarios before I just completely checked out. It does have some interesting elements of it. Again, I could probably find something positive on every one of these games, but ultimately, out of all the campaign games I got, this one I was like, nope, and that is Sword and Sorcery. So the first thing about this that I would very much, and this was funny because this game came out in 2017. Yeah, 2017. It's 387 out of the top 500, and this had like a 50-page rulebook, which at the time was like unheard of. Now, I mean, now you get Frosthaven with like 80-something pages. Gloomhaven came out, funny enough, in the same year. And then like other massive campaign-style games that are like, hey, here's your encyclopedia on how to play. The problem that I felt with Sword and Sorcery was there was just too much maintenance to keep a hold of, that the rulebook was just horrendous in explaining. Like, I felt like I was constantly digging into that, just trying to play a general scenario. And then I thought the writing was extremely weak. So if you're going to have a large rulebook, at least like make it worth, like for me, it wasn't worth my effort to retain all the information. Like a great example is I just did my discussion for Aeon Trespass, and I talked about how I read that rulebook 3 times, and that is more than 50 pages to my knowledge. But I actively wanted to read it over and over to retain the information to keep playing it, because there was so much more meat and depth in it. And Sword and Sorcery just didn't have that. The dialogue just reminded me why it's really hard to write dialogue. The good thing about Sword and Sorcery was it did have a kind of an innovative AI system. Like, the AI didn't feel stupid like a lot of other games of this ilk, where it's like, okay, yeah, for the AI to attack me, it's going to have to walk through that trap, which kills it. Okay, but... So AI is not the easiest to run. However, I think just other games that have come out around that time, or even later, just do that AI either way simpler or just way better, where it doesn't interrupt the flow of the game. So, again, Sword and Sorcery is at number 10. There's obviously 9 other games on here that I think, I just definitely dislike more. But, yeah, this one I completely checked out on. My number 9 is a game that started off extremely strong, and I was very surprised to find out that it was still within the top 500, just because, and it's relatively high. It's at 230, which I'm wondering if this is only at 230 because no one continued after a certain amount of time. My number 9 is Time Stories, and like I said, Time Stories up until like the 3rd scenario was really good. Like, I can see 230 being it for that. But as they kept going, and there's out of like the 7 others they released, there was only one within that I thought was really good. It's actually my favorite of the entire campaign or in the entire series. But they just completely lost focus. I don't know if there was like, I can't remember if there was a different designer for each scenario, but there needed to be someone like that's like overhead, that's like okaying everything. And if there was, boy, did he just phone it in. They had something really special with Time Stories, and I mean the system itself was fine. It was that Groundhog Day kind of thing where you were going to run out of time. There was no way you were not. But the problem with that is it was kind of like, oh, you ran out of time, start all over, like all of it. I know you were almost near the end, start all over, and I don't know anyone who did that. I know professionals in the industry didn't even do that. They're like, okay, we're here now. Like, just because you're not gonna make, different decisions. You just know, oh, don't open that door, and okay, well, we'll just pretend we didn't open the door and we just continue on till we're here. And that's not a good mechanism. That's not a good design to where people are just going to pretend that they, got to where they are. Now, I did that because I was doing it for the channel, and no one wants to see us do the same thing for another 3 hours. And that's the other thing, is these scenarios were long, so to restart is asinine. It's completely, unbelievable that they would think, oh yeah, no, that's amazing. But yeah, so with Time Stories, it just, the only reason that, I haven't completely deleted these videos off my channel is because I just have such fond memories of actually playing it with very close friends. And so that was a blast, but, eventually I probably will redo those just to kind of come back to it. Just maybe it might be fun, I don't know. But yeah, that campaign tanked so hard. Tanked so bad they had to redo it. And even then, they've only done 2 scenarios for the new Time Stories, so they completely just lost focus on that. So yeah, that's my number 9, Time Stories. My number 8, again, some of these blew me away that they were even in the top 500. And this one was at 351. This is kind of an expansion. I think it's a standalone expansion. It's kind of a re-implementation of another game that I also don't really like, but I don't think that game is anywhere near the top 500. Oh, it's actually 560. Okay, so I lied. This one, I kind of have a personal grudge with the original publisher, so that was very frustrating, but obviously I'm over that because that was, 6 years ago. This is Evolution Climate. Or Evolution. Evolution's 560. Evolution Climate is 351. And it says it re-implements Evolution. So Evolution, at its core, kind of sounds like a really interesting idea. It's about the concept of evolution. Hey, if you make a small, not herbivore, and someone makes a larger carnivore, they're going to get eaten. Okay, well, you give it traits to be able to be like, okay, well, I'm going to make it intelligent, so it's going to climb trees because that carnivore can't climb trees. And in theory, I think that works, but then it just kind of immediately fizzles out the longer you play it. This is Evolution, by the way, but this Evolution Climate does kind of the same thing. It just adds climate. And every single time I've played Climate, because they have this centralized board, obviously, where food goes, but then they also have a track of climate, that players control. So you're playing cards that will have, a sun symbol or a frost symbol, and that's going to move this on this track. And basically, when all players play a card in the middle, it determines, food that's available, but also determines how far that track moves. The problem with that track is because it does absolutely nothing. It's almost like a bluff where it's like, I'm gonna make it super hot. But no one plays it like that. So for us, it just felt like, okay, well because if it goes too far to the sun, then it's like it burns everything out and everyone dies. If it goes all the way to the cold, everything freezes up and everyone dies. So since everyone's aware of that, and no one can survive those extreme temperatures. Yeah, you can have certain creatures and animals survive harsher weather of heat or cold, and that's cool in theory again. But then we found that since everyone knows that you can't play to the extremes of either, it just always stays in the middle, and then everyone's kind of always able to get food, and then you just run your own little engine of you keeping small herbivores and larger carnivores, and you eat your own, or it just becomes this weird kind of cutthroat, I'm gonna keep eating your animals. And I just kind of find it to be a relatively nothing game. On top of the fact that I had an issue with this publisher back when I play tested this. At the time, I played so much Evolution Climate, I think, were they going to go on Kickstarter? It's been so long. They came out in 2016, and it's 2023 now. So, yeah, about 6 years ago. And it was just an absolute slog to play test this over and over. And I'm not going to go into my issues with the publisher at that time, but just know that Evolution, probably on the first play, is okay. and then just the concept of climate just really doesn't add anything, and that's kind of where I completely fell off, and I have no interest in playing this game. So that is my number. Oh, my number, wow, 7? 10, not 8. That was my number 8. My number 7 is a 1v1 skirmish game that this one is definitely older. And for some reason, well, actually, I know why this one doesn't work. This came out in 2004. Obviously highly regarded by many. It's ranked 162 overall. And I mean, there's a lot of games that are kind of in this same vein, the same genre, that just doesn't work for me. First of all, skirmish games are very difficult for me to like because they're ultimately roll and resolve. And this kind of has that on top of another element of randomness. So my number 7 is Memoir 44. So Memoir 44, like I said, is ranked 162 overall, and this is a, in 1v1. I mean, there are other expansions you can add. I think the Overlord expansion does teams, or just this massive scale warfront. What this game does have going for it is, 1, a ton of expansions, and 2, you can do a lot of different kinds of battles. However, the battles are historically accurate, at least to the theme and like the flavor text and stuff, but also in the way that they're designed. So if you're playing, obviously, Germany versus Britain, I mean, whatever, and in real life, Britain won, well, they have an advantage in that scenario. So to me, it's like, okay, well, this isn't like a what if. Yeah, technically Germany can win, but it's in so much favor of to be historically accurate that I'm just like, well, I can just read the Wikipedia page on this battle and then pretend I played this. So that's already kind of a problem for me. There's a lot of games that kind of do this where it's like, okay, I get it, you're historically accurate, but I thought this was going to be kind of like a, ooh, like, what if, this happened instead? And you can't really do that because you're probably going to piss off people who want it to be historically accurate. So that's already kind of a small problem for me. This does have roll to resolve, which, I mean, it came out in 2004, so I can't fault it too much for that. But then I still don't want to do that. I don't like skirmish games where I have to strategize about everything I want to do. It's like, okay, I'm going to move my units over here. That's going to give me an advantage on this side because I'm going to get bonuses from being in cover. That's going to allow me to take out their tank because I can use my grenades and that to take out that tank. And, alright, I missed. So, your turn. I just really don't like that. It feels like like I get too hyped up and excited for like my turn. I'm like, oh, this could be super cool. And then you just roll and see. And you're like, all blanks. Or even worse, it's like grenades. Okay, cool, that's still a miss. There's been like 2 skirmish games that have dice in them that I think are done wonderfully. And that's Summoner Wars 2nd Edition, specifically 2nd Edition with those specialized dice, and Mythic Battles, Pantheon. And I'm assuming Ragnarok. I can't imagine they changed the dice system. But both of those do dice in a wonderful way that even if you miss, it's extremely rare. It's like you're at least going to get 1 hit. And then on top of that, Memoir 44 has the shared deck, which I know people are saying, we'll buy 2 copies and then each get their own deck. Yeah, that would alleviate some randomness, but I don't want to buy 2 copies of a game. I shouldn't have to buy 2 copies of a game. So that adds in an element of, okay, well, my opponent is drawing all the cards that are benefiting him. I'm not getting any of those, so he's just able to... I don't like that. It's too much randomness on the shared deck and too much on the dice. On top of it, feeling a little unbalanced, so this one just kind of doesn't work for me in any way. But what's very weird is Radlands works for me. And I don't know why. I think because it's shared deck as well. But for some reason, I think there's just... Maybe there's not mitigation, really, for the deck, but they're multi-use cards, so I think that helps, is the fact that if it's... Like, I never feel like my opponent is getting something because it's like I'm drawing and there's multiple uses of them. So if he's drawing a card that, could have been good for me, well, at least the cards I'm drawing, I can be like, oh, well, that effect doesn't work, but this icon does. So, I don't know. It's just very weird, but I just want my skirmish games to be less random. But that's just me. So that is my number 7, Memoir 44. My number 6. Oh, I can just look at the I can just look at the numbers next to it. My number 6, I was actually very surprised was not higher, and this one I know I am in the minority of, because a lot of people have touted this game as being amazing, and probably the ranking on here, is indicative of that. This one is 161 out of the 500. And this game does have, out of actually a lot of the games on here, this game has a lot of good to it, but the negatives that I have for it are too big for me to want to continue playing this. So my number 6 is Dwellings of Eldervale. Oh, this one just missed on a lot of fronts for me. It's obviously it's a big area control game with tons of ways to score victory points, and each faction plays differently. They have multiple different units that have separate abilities, and that's really cool. And they're units that you never, or they're factions that you don't see a lot in games like this. It is a worker placement game that you'd expect to be this big epic, Blood Rage or Rising Sun type of battle, and it's not. But the facts that I have is obviously everyone likes the big monsters. Well, the big monsters are there once, and you beat them, someone beats them, and then they're gone. And it's like, okay, well, that's anticlimactic. Like, at least in like other games that have big monsters, they're able to come back out if they get destroyed, or they're very difficult to kill. And I found the monsters here to just be kind of like bulky and a gimmick. It's like, oh man, they make a noise. Well, at least the version I had, they made a noise, and I'm like, oh, that's neat. But then they just kind of stayed there, and it's like, all right, I'm gonna go in there with my meeples, and I beat them. Okay, but the other problem that I had with this game was, and to be fair, I only ever played this. Oh, funny enough, I only ever played this at 3, and I was like, oh, maybe it's best at like 5. Nope, it's best. People are saying it's best at 3. At the end of the day, the special ability cards were just extremely random, just top deck victory points or special abilities that it's like, okay, like I won by literally just and I remember playing last time I played this game, I remember watching someone top deck a card. I can't even remember exactly what card it was. I think it was like victory points or something, or it was like something that helped them in battle. And then all I did the rest of the game was just top deck for points, and I'm like, that's okay, and I won. The other thing that I don't like is they have a bunch of these doors that have like special abilities on them, but for you can score off of those based off how far up on like an elemental track that you're on. Every time I've played this, no one has given like any care on what those cards actually do. It's just a matter of, oh well, I'm high on this track, I'm going to get those doors. That's going to give me a bunch of victory points. I just for everything that this game offered, it was just immediately watered down to get victory points. And I know that sounds counterintuitive to a lot of other games that I really like Blood Rage and Rising Sun, that are about victory points, but I felt in those games, you have to earn it. Like, I mean, especially in Rising Sun and Blood Rage, you actively have to earn those victory points. And in here, I just felt like you didn't. You could top deck for stuff, or you could just completely mill for, those special cards on the side and be like, all right, well, that was 60 points right there. And it just did not work for me. I like the idea of it being kind of an area control worker placement game. You don't see a lot of those. But this was just a big bombastic game that I felt just was missing the mark on a lot of stuff. And I think I've done a discussion on every game here. I think I have, yeah. Interesting. So you can definitely go check those out. I hope that I'm sitting here and I'm consistent with my thoughts on that. But yeah, Dwellings of Eldervale, I mean, it's sitting at an 8.2 at 161. I don't get it. Out of all of these, really, this is the one I'm completely just missing. So yeah, that's my number 6, Dwellings of Eldervale. Surprisingly, I don't think it's gotten any expansions. I mean, this came out in 2020. Wow. Yeah, I would have totally expected them to actually support it, but I guess, I mean, there was a lot of stuff in there. I'm just kind of taking a look at some, and it's from Breaking Games. And you know what's funny is that the board and layout kind of reminds me of, I think it was called Rise of Tribes. Yeah. Oh, it also had roll to resolve combat, so that was already a no. Like, if there's any game, especially nowadays, that's roll to resolve combat, and it's fine. Roll to resolve is perfectly fine for me in cooperative games because you succeed or fail together. But in competitive games, just rolling, being like, okay, I rolled a fucking 1 again. Like, all right, oh, your turn. Oh, a 6. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I'll just take all my units back. I can't do it. I mean, cool production though. So yeah, that is my number 6, Dwellings of Eldervale. My number 5 is another older game, and this one actually has been re-implemented with another theme that is purely generic. They're both really the same game. This could be this, but I think the re-implementation is not this high. This is number 332. Gonna take a quick look at what it was re-implemented by and where that's at. 853. It's the same game, but this one is obviously older. This came out in 2008, and that is Ghost Stories. Re-implemented by Last Bastion. Ghost Stories I actually think is kind of a cooler theme, even though I'm really big into fantasy. I think the monks fighting ghosts is unique. I just talked about in a few of these other games how skirmish games or fighting games are, how they have roll resolve to see if you do anything. That's exactly Ghost Stories, and I know I just said I like roll resolve in cooperative games. I apparently am straight up lying, because that's all this game is. This game is, again, like this and Last Bastion, which Ghost Stories would have been an old video. That would have been early on in the channel, but Last Bastion is definitely a more recent of my thoughts on it. But it's just, it's fabricated difficulty, in my opinion. Like, I'm not saying that this doesn't have any strategy. I'm not saying that depending on which tiles you go to, that doesn't give some idea of strategy. But at the end of the day, to defeat the ghosts and to defeat the bigger bosses, you have to roll a die. And I just do not like that. I don't find that compelling. I don't find that, like other high-end strategy cooperative games, I feel like whether you succeed or fail is dependent on how well the group is playing. Robinson Crusoe, Spirit Island, newest one is Frostpunk, Gloomhaven. Like, all of these are about how well the players are playing together and utilizing special abilities. Ghost Stories, it's like, oh my god, it's so hard. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, you have to roll a die. If you're rolling, if you're like, well, we need to defeat this green monster. Okay, we didn't roll a green, so guess it's there forever. I mean, obviously not forever. And of course, there are ways to utilize the tiles in the middle to remove them without rolling the die. But the majority of it is going to be rolling. And I don't find that fun. I love brutally difficult co-op games. I actually find if you win a co-op game over and over and over, then you've figured it out. It serves no purpose. But there has to be some element of mitigation or some element of control if you're going to add randomness, so it's not just sit around and just roll a die to see what happens. Last Bastion is like this as well. So it's like, and also the way that the monsters come out, like the ghosts come out in this, or the fantasy creatures in Last Bastion, how they come out is also kind of just a faux difficulty, in my opinion. It's like, oh man, okay, we used up all of our tokens to get rid of these really hard, green monsters. Okay, cool, we did that, and more green. Okay, I'm just going to stay in this corner and just not do anything for the rest of the game because I need to roll super well to kill these, and hopefully we survive. It's just too much. I mean, this game came out in 2008, not quite the oldest game on the list. I think that might actually go to Memoir 44, yeah, 100%. It's going to be Memoir 44 is the oldest. But I don't know. I obviously didn't play this in 2008. It would have been years later, but the co-op games that I was playing at the time I played this were equally hard, but had at least some mitigation. And so this one just never clicked for me. To be fair, I never tried the expansions. What were they called? White Moon and Black Secret. Okay, yeah, White Moon and Black Secret. I never tried those. And yeah, so Ghost Stories and Last Bastion just definitely don't like, purely for its randomness. And that is my number 5. My number 4 might be the game that actually made me more mad than I've gotten in a very long time. And this one is ranked 340 and it has such a cool idea. However, is undermined by its gameplay, and it's just so frustrating. And that is The King's Dilemma. This was one of those big legacy games that was kind of just like had just a bunch of envelopes that was based on the narrative that the players were telling. It it was very heavily negotiation with different factions of a house. They're all advisors to the king, and they all of course had families and they had motives. You had like secret motives that you were trying to get that would dictate the way a story would go. And they did have really cool dilemmas to come across, that if you wanted to play your house a certain way, you could be morally opposed to other players. And that's cool. In theory, again, this is a competitive game. It's about who gets the most, reputation or the most, victory points. I played this at 4, even though weirdly enough it's saying best with 5, but yeah, I felt like 4 was a good one. But I think 5 actually would be pretty good because it's heavily negotiation, but it's like if 2 people were on one side and 2 people were on another, the 5th person could actually divide that. They could be the tiebreaker, so actually I can see why 5 would be a lot better. The reason why this didn't work for me is because it was so narratively driven that if the story was going in a direction that like you as a player weren't invested in, or you didn't want it to go, it just became very difficult to continue to want to play that. I remember just specifically there was one element where it's like, okay, and of course this could purely be because I'm the one who actually bought the game, so it's like, okay, well, I had a monetary investment, so it's like, okay, this is a narrative story, this is kind of the way I wanted to go, and it didn't go that way, and it's like, well, that's extremely annoying, all because of just the way of it's like people who could hoard votes and just be like, okay, well, I've been hoarding all these, so now I'm going to use them all to make it go this way. And it's like if you were playing D&D as a group and just one person steamrolled it in one direction and made it unfun for the other players. And that's my experience with this game. It's like, okay, well, the majority of us wanted the story to go this way, but you just happen to have more, negotiating power, so that completely, it's like, okay, nope, that one's gone, because it wasn't like a come back to it, or it's like we can do both at some point. It was a dilemma. You had to do one or the other. And I just found that to be extremely cheap and unfun and very frustrating, because it's like, okay, well, now I'm along for the story or for the ride that I didn't want to be on in the first place, and cool, like I'm finding it very hard to give a shit now. I mean, again, some people can be really into that very kind of Game of Thrones-y-esque, where it's like, okay, like I'm going to undermine you to do this, I'm going to work, with the king. It's like, yeah, no, let's not let those foreigners in our land. You whisper to them and you're like, okay, and you have a bunch of negotiating power, and that's what happens. But because it was, and that's fine in like negotiation strategy games like Game of Thrones, the board game, or Rising Sun, which is very heavily negotiation based, or Twilight Imperium. Just because those are finite, those don't have a narrative element to be invested in. It's like, yeah, if you get betrayed in one of those games, it's going to be pretty bitter. I've been betrayed multiple times. I've actually betrayed multiple people, but then the game's over, and you're like, okay, well, that was fun. Who won? Doesn't really matter. But King's Dilemma has that story element where it's like you kind of have to be invested to really play the game. At least I do. Anyway, so that's kind of why it's on this list, is because I am so much more focused on narrative games, and this one just left a really sour taste in my mouth. So that's my number 4, King's Dilemma. My number 3 was another game that I was obviously I was in the minority of. I'm very curious. I haven't looked at this game since it came out to see where it's ranked. Okay. Yeah, this is... Oh, I thought it was 84. I'm like, there's no way. This is 341 overall. And I'm still relatively surprised that it's this high. And I actually did play it with the best, what people are saying is the best number. But this one... Oh boy, this one was kind of one of those games you put in a lot of effort to get nothing back, or in my opinion. So my number 4, right? My number 3. My number 3 is Oath, Chronicles of Empire and Exile. Man, what a disappointing one for me. Like, leader games, like, the way it was advertised, or at least the way I took it, was this kind of narrative-driven kind of, each game was going to be like a chronicle from one to the other. And technically, that can be true if your group is the one to physically write down and document every game session. The game itself is not that. Like, it's not like you have a character sheet or a story sheet to talk about what happened, who won, who did what story elements did you use, any of that. It was literally like as if you were a chronicler, and you were actually writing down like, oh man, and then this person, played this card, and then that caused like, which I know some people have done. I'm sure there's people that this is their game, this is their group's game, this is their lifestyle game. My group and the sheer nature of this channel does not allow for that kind of gameplay. So to me, this felt kind of like the rich get richer, which is thematically appropriate because it was kind of like, okay, well, one person plays what did they call the actual, like, the big guy, the big kahuna. What was his name? It was kind of like a weird one versus many. Oh, the Chancellor. So one person played the Chancellor, and the other people played like Exiles. And it was, again, kind of a King of the Hill element, where the Chancellor just had all this power. He can try and get people to join him. They could backstab him to get an objective fulfilled, or he just had to basically hold his position for a certain number of rounds. And the other problem with this game is you never knew when the game was going to end. After a certain number of rounds, I can actually see it, 1, 2, 3, 4, at about, I think, 5 rounds, the Chancellor rolls a die. If it's a 6, game's over. He wins. Then it gets increasingly easier for him to win, because then it becomes a 5, then it becomes a 3, but the game's almost pretty much over by then. But there were ways for him to, lose power, then he gets, like, excommunicated. But I felt like if you weren't playing this game over and over and over and over, it's going to play out the same way, which is the rich get richer from game to game, because you were rewarded for winning. You got better cards, better starting position, and it's like, okay, well, you won. Great. The catch-up mechanic is you continue to win? How does that work for any of us? So, to me, even if it wants to be a lifestyle game, it doesn't implore that, because why would anyone want to come back whenever they're already severely behind? It's like, well, it was very hard for us to beat you in the first place, so how do you expect us to beat you now, unless we just really all band together just to take you down, which I hate that. That just to me is like meta. It's basically going into a competitive game and be like, oh, Seth always wins games, let's just target him the whole game. It's like, I've never played this game. Yeah, but you always win the other games. This is nothing like any of those other games. Yeah, but you always win, so we're just going to make sure you don't. It's like, cool, I'm not playing. That's inherently unfair. And that's what Oath, Chronicles of Empire and Exile felt. Because then, to bring the Chancellor down who was winning, everyone has to gang up, crown someone else Chancellor, so then they're in exile, and then you just kind of rinse and repeat. And I just don't feel like this game had the legs to do that. There was a lot of content in the game, a lot of different strategies on cards you're going to play at various locations. Like, it didn't have, like, horrible mechanisms, but it was overly long, a long King of the Hill, because at the same time, you took so much effort to build up power for it to completely be taken down so easily. Like, battling in this game was, I kind of liked it because it wasn't rewarding turtling where you just have your army and you're like, okay, I'm super strong, no one can beat me, therefore I'll just hold out and win. Because in battling, the attacker and defender loses resources, so they just become, it's like, well, I'm going to fight you. Okay, well, I'm weaker now as a result. I beat you, but I'm now weaker. That's smart, but at the same time, if you, because it did kind of like an Inish kind of thing, where if you were meeting a victory condition of yours, that was you had to hold it until your next turn. And whereas to me, it's funny, I think that works extremely well in Inish because it is kind of a finite game. It's easier to hit those conditions and harder to take them from you. In Oath, it was kind of like, okay, I just have to sit here and I'm controlling 6 regions and I'll win. And oh, you just went and took one. Okay, now let's all start over. And it just went on for way too long. I didn't like, there was all the reasons were just why it didn't work for us. So it was ultimately a flop for us. And that is my number 3, Oath, Chronicles of Empire, and Exile. My number 2, I have actually given another shot. I want to say recently, but who knows how long time has just flown by. This is actually a 2-player game. This one is ranked number 19 overall. This is easily the highest one out of all of these at number 19. And I have tried this game so many times. Like base game, everyone said try it with the expansion, it fixes it. And then there was a new expansion that came out that I was like, funny enough, I actually kind of liked better than the one that everyone told me fixed the game. But this one, I just do not enjoy, and that is Seven Wonders Duel. And this isn't even an advocate for, like, Seven Wonders as a 2-player game. I'm not one of those people where I'm just like, no, one, I have the 2nd edition, so it doesn't even let you play it 2 players in that anymore. But this is also kind of one of those, me as a gamer, I don't play filler games. Like, if I'm, like, if I need 30 minutes to kill, I'm watching YouTube videos, or I'm doing chores, or I'm doing something else. I'm not like, oh, well, we have 30 minutes to kill before we have to head out. Oh, well, let me set up a game real quick. Let's get comfortable, sit down, play a game, and then jet. It's just like, it doesn't work for me. That's just how I've never done that. I have never once broken out a game to kill time to go do something else. And I know that's why a lot of people like this. It definitely, obviously, only requires 2 people, and it hits that sweet spot for a lot of players. That's totally fine. This one, I just would rather play anything else than a 2-player game of Seven Wonders Duel. I much rather prefer the scoring element in Seven Wonders, because at least you play a full game of that and you feel like you play the full game, and then it's like, okay, and you tally up the points. You had your strategy, hoping that it was better than another player's strategy, and then you tally it up and you're like, oh yay, it was, or oh man, that was close, or whatever it might be. What bothers me a lot with Seven Wonders Duel is the fact that it's kind of twofold. Yes, you can go to scoring in this game if no one meets the immediate victory conditions, which are getting to the end of of the war track. You get that track to the other player, you immediately win. Science, I want to say it's getting all types of icons, lets you win. And there's a third one, but I do not remember the third one. Each time you acquire a military card, you advance... Oh, it's actually on here. Yeah, you advance towards your opponent's capital. You reach the capital, you win. 6 of the 7 different scientific symbols you win. Oh, okay, that's it. Okay, so it was just those 2. Maybe there was a third one with the expansions. Anyway, my problem is actually with those 2 auto-win conditions, and it's very interesting to me that a lot of people really like this game, and maybe I just don't actually hear comparisons, but I do see a lot of people hating on the auto-win condition in Space Base. And actually, I'm wondering if people who hate that auto-win condition also don't like the auto-win condition in here, or if they do, why they don't like the auto-win in Space Base. I'm very actually curious on if those people like one and not the other, or maybe they actually don't like both, or maybe they like both. Who knows? But The reason why I don't like those auto win strategies is because you don't have a lot of control of what your opponent can get. Because of the way that the board is laid out, with some face up and some face down, there could be like a face up military one. And let's say obviously your opponent's going military, and if you let them do that, then that's your own fault and you deserve to lose. Or science, both of those. If you're actively letting your opponent try to just get those, then sure. But if you don't, if you try to compete and you're like, okay, there's obviously a face up military card here. I'm going to take that. I don't want to, but I'm going to just so I can move that away from me. And then a new card flips over and it's another military card. It's like, there's nothing I could do about that. And that has happened every time I've played this game. So it's like, okay, I'm going to take this 1 military strength here. And then I move it 1. Flip over, oh, a 3. 3 military. That's cool. So obviously they're going to take that and then move it 3 over. So you took a card you didn't even want to in the first place, only for it to not have any matter anyway. It's like, okay, well now you just moved 2 towards me when you could have just moved 1. That was then I could have taken it. But you have no idea what those face down cards are. It's the same with science. It's like, oh man, okay, I know they don't have that science icon, and there's one right there. Boom, I'm going to take it. Flip. Oh, cool, the same science icon. All right, or a different one that you needed. So cool, you just took that, and I gained nothing. I'm not a huge fan of games because I don't like hate drafting. It's just, I know you can in a lot of games. I personally do not, because I just don't find that fun, where it's like, I'm such an asshole. I don't get anything for taking this card, but I know it hurts you, so fuck off. Yeah, that's not rewarding for me. I want my strategy to beat out other players' strategies, and if they don't, I like to know why, so I can better myself. I don't want to just feel like I dicked someone else over and made them miserable. And you can also do that in this. Like, if you're like, oh, I know you don't need that card, so I'm just going to take this and throw it away for some money. Like, it just feels more personal in this game because it's like they can see that, and they're like, well, you don't even need that. Yeah, but I know you do, so haha, 1 gold. It's like, at least in Seven Wonders, like, you're drafting, so you can at least mentally be like, okay, I know they've been going for science. Okay, I'm going to take that, even though you don't auto-win in regular Seven Wonders, but it's like, okay, I'm going to take that, because they don't know, so that if you do turn it in for money, it's not like this vindictive, like, just right in their face, like Seven Wonders Duel is. I don't know. This one blows my mind at why people like it. Those are the reasons why I don't. And again, I could just be taking it way too seriously. That's perfectly fine. There's thousands upon thousands of other games that work well at 2 that don't have those elements to it that I would rather play. But again, I wouldn't even break even the better games that I like over this. I wouldn't even break out to kill time. Like, I'm just not that kind of gamer. So that is my number 2, Seven Wonders Duel. Funny enough, 2-player game at number 2. And my number 1, which should come at no surprise. Maybe it does. I don't know. I don't know if people were even expecting a list like this. I think it's pretty interesting, just to give some insight on why I don't like certain games that the masses like. Everyone has theirs. Everyone has their minority of just what worked for them and what didn't. My number 1, which I bet people would have expected Kingdom Death Monster to be in here. And it is not. It is not my number 1. I can actually tell you exactly, because Kingdom Death Monster was considered. And it's overall number 62. Hold on, before I even talk about that. Let me tell you, because if anyone has watched this channel and has watched my 3 discussions on KDM, and my top 10 on games that are better in KDM, which I could definitely do better now that there's actual better boss battlers out. But it is not on here. And that is because... Where are you? Did I not save you? Dang it. Well, anyway, it's not on the list. My number 1 is ranked 229, and it is Ankh, Gods of Egypt. Mainly also because I expected to fully love this game, because Rising Sun and Blood Rage are in my top 100 games of all time. I absolutely love Rising Sun. I like it more than Blood Rage. And Ankh Gods of Egypt gave me such a visceral negative reaction, so much so that I had to realize my initial discussion that it's like, okay, probably should have taken, 5-10 minutes to then do it, but we did it like right after. And then I redid it, and I redid it after playing it with multiple player counts. But at the time, I had played it at 3, which, do people say not recommend? You sickos. 106 of you are disgusting for recommending this at 3. I could see, people are saying it's best at 2 and 4, and that is absolutely the case, but this should have just been made as a 2-player game. But Ankh, made by the same designer as Blood Rage and Rising Sun, like I said, but I just do not like really anything that this game has to offer, mainly because it's in that same vein of those 3. It's very hard to not compare them because they are kind of a trilogy made by the same designer in that same mythology of Viking, so Norse, then Japanese, and then Egypt. But in a 3-player game, actually in a 3 and a 4-player game, worse than a 3-player game, it has this unique. It is unique, but I don't know who just yes man this mechanism but it's a merge mechanism, which I guess kind of thematically makes sense as players reach a certain amount of victory points, other players' gods are forgotten, and so they have to merge. The lowest victory point players have to merge together, and they play together, and that is such a awful, horrible mechanism, in my opinion, especially at 3. Because at a 3-player game, the only person who is not affected is the one in first. And if you are in first, and then the other 2 players merge, you are guaranteed to win. Because they just lose victory points. And it's like, yeah, they play together, and they take like their god power, so each god does have a unique ability, even though the rest of their board is the same as everyone else. They merge the god ability, so there's like a twofer, like where there's like, okay, well now we just have both abilities on both of our turns. It does not matter. It doesn't matter at all, because it's like, well, I'm still going to be gaining victory points like normal. That player just lost everything, so might as well just slap them and be like, okay, did that feel better? It probably did. Then what just happened to you in this game? And it's like, no, you don't. It's like you're being kicked out of like a game of Monopoly after hours of playing. It's like, no, you don't get to play anymore. Everything you have is now mine. Except in this, it's like everything you have is now gone. I know you were working hard. Unfortunately, not hard enough to beat the first player, so now you lose everything. It's awful. It's so frustratingly bad. However, in a 4-player game, that is alleviated somewhat because more people can merge. And in a 2-player game, which is significantly the best way to play this game, it doesn't even exist. And that's where it becomes, a lot of people are like comparing this a little bit to chess. And it does feel that way a little bit in a 1v1. That merge element is clearly gone. So it becomes a tightened area control element of utilizing your followers, your special abilities, and then everyone has the same cards, but it's one of those where, the order of you player cards is going to be different. It's like, okay, my god with this special ability versus your god with that special ability. Yeah, we have the same tracks to go up that give us, like, various powers as well as controlling different monsters, because all these games have those. That's gonna be a lot more strategic, and you trying to get into the head of your opponent, and does not feel as personal, and you don't lose anything. If you lose in this game, it's just to one other person, not because some third party, happened to get up on the track faster than you, and then you're just all the way down at the bottom. Clearly, like, I know a lot of people who really like this game. Out of all my discussions, surprisingly, this is the one that got the most negative reaction which I've said worse things about worse games. Like, I've shit all over Kingdom Death Monster, and it's ranked 62. But the problem is that it's a very finite community of Kingdom Death Monster. Because not everyone can afford, $2,000 of a game. Ankh is very much more accessible, so it was a larger community. But yeah, it blew my mind. I was like, you know what? All right, fair. And I very rarely redo discussions. The only time I ever really redo videos is if some significant amount of time has passed. That's like, okay, like what I'm doing now is I'm eventually going to be redoing older videos for my old channel name and all that. That's different. I went out and I'm like, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe it was just a very bad experience. And I was like, I'll try it again. Tried it 4, tried it 2, redid my discussion with a much cooler, which I got a much positive response, thank God. A lot of people were like, hey, I disagree with you, but, thank you for redoing this. Again, I would never play this again. But I will say, the thing it has going for it, besides its miniatures, which are beautiful, is this is the best one to play it to out of those 3. Rising Sun is, actually, I don't even think it allows for 2, and Blood Rage is just bad at 2. Ankh is the best at 2, and I wish Eric Lang would have just done that. I wish he would have just been like, this is a 2-player game, and left it at that, especially if he built it on the idea, because I've heard that Blood Rage and Rising Sun were all built on the concept of older games. If that's the case, and he took Ankh and designed it from the idea of chess, well, chess is a 2-player game, so he should have just made it that way, and I guarantee you it would probably not be number 1 on this list. But that being said, Ankh is my number 1 game that I am in the minority of. And those are my top 10 games that I am in the minority. And I'm very much aware of that. I mean, surprisingly, actually, a lot of these games were in the 300s, but I think that out of the thousands upon thousands of games, that is pretty commendable to be that high. These are the ones that I don't like for some reason or another. But, like I said at the very beginning of this, if you made it this far without seething, and if you are, it's okay. You're going to be okay. I'm one guy. I'm one guy who didn't like 10 games out of the thousands that I've probably played. So you can still enjoy them. I'm not taking them away from you. But, because I'm sure there's going to be games that you're like, well, I fucking hate this one. It's like, but how? It's brilliant. Like, everyone shits on Talisman. And I'm like, I love Talisman. So there you go. Talisman is one of my favorite games. Been in my top 100 forever. Everyone hates it. And that's alright. But that's it, everyone. Those are my top 10 in the minority games. Let me know what games that you don't like that the masses do in the comments below. And let me know what you think of these games in the comments below as well. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you. Hey everyone, thank you for watching, and I really hope that you enjoyed the video. If you would like to see more of my content, go ahead and click that subscribe button and the bell to be notified whenever I upload any new content. If you feel like supporting the channel, you can go ahead and click that Patreon link to be taken to my Patreon, and any help is truly appreciated. Other than that, stick around for any other run-throughs or reviews or cool top 10s or whatever I feel like putting on. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you.